had always considered myself someone who knew what was going on, but that day I realized that much had been hidden from me and perhaps it was now all beginning. My name is Marcus. I'm 41 years old and I live just outside Dayton, Ohio. I've spent the last 12 years working as an aerospace technician, mostly quiet work, mostly behind the scenes. I'm the kind of guy who makes sure things don't fall apart. That morning was like any other. I was making eggs, humming to myself, and Diane was dressed for work, which wasn't unusual. She sat down at the kitchen island, legs crossed, her eyes avoiding mine. Then she said it just like she was reading off a grocery list. I'm moving in with Alec. I stopped scrambling the eggs. Didn't turn around. Just let the spatula rest against the pan. Alec, I repeated like I was tasting the word for the first time. Yeah, she said, her voice calm. Alec, my division supervisor. My boss. She picked a piece of lint off her sleeve as if that detail of who Alec was to me was just inconvenient static. I finally turned and looked at her. She looked proud, polished, like she had finally arrived at the version of herself she always wanted to be. I walked over, turned off the stove. So when does this happen? I asked. She blinked. Today. I'm leaving this morning. Alec is picking me up. I sat down across from her, and for a second she looked almost disappointed. Like she expected a scene, tears, screaming, the whole dramatic collapse. But I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I stood up, grabbed the pan, scraped the eggs into the sink. I wasn't hungry anymore. She stood too, gathering her purse like she was late for an appointment. I didn't mean to hurt you. No, I said calmly. You meant to escape me. She looked away. I have to go. I nodded and followed her to the door. She hesitated at the threshold like she was waiting for something for me to stop her. I didn't. Instead, I opened the door and said, don't forget the umbrella. Looks like rain later. That was it. No begging. No last minute please. She stepped outside, heels clicking against the concrete, Alec's car already waiting by the curb. I watched her walk away, her steps quick and confident. She didn't look back. As I shut the door, the silence settled back in. Like something important had cracked but hadn't quite shattered. And in that moment, I wasn't broken. Just awake. The next morning, I walked into a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. The first thing I noticed was the living room. It was empty in a way that felt intentional. The couch cushions were gone, but not the couch. My coffee mug collection was untouched, but the matching coasters? Vanished. One of our framed wedding photos still hung on the wall, but the one of us in Asheville, our favorite trip, was missing. Half the furniture was still there. The half that didn't matter. I stood in the doorway with a toolbox dangling from my hand. I had gone out that morning to replace a broken wrench. Thought it would keep my mind off things. Instead, I came home to a museum of things she didn't want. In the kitchen, the blender was gone, but she left the cracked measuring cups. She took our new electric grill but left me the old frying pan that should be thrown away by now. She took all the new towels and bedding while leaving me the old ones that had been washed many times. The knife set, our anniversary gift to each other, had the good knives removed. She left the dull ones. Deliberate. Everything she touched had been curated to send a message, you don't matter anymore. Even the shower curtain had been swapped out. The cherry blue one we picked out last fall replaced with a stiff gray thing I'd never seen before. A hotel vibe. Impersonal. Efficient. I opened the bedroom closet and just stared. All of her clothes were gone. But not just that, she'd taken the hangers too. Emptied the drawers. The jewelry box I gave her on our third Christmas together? Still there, but every compartment inside was hollow. In the bathroom, her drawer was empty. Mine had been rifled through, my deodorant gone. My cologne spilled. Not stolen. Just poured out and left to evaporate. A war. Quiet, psychological, precise. The neighbors must have seen her loading the car. Probably waved. Maybe helped. I stepped outside for air, and sure enough, there was Ellen next door, watering her hydrangeas like it was any other Tuesday. She saw me and gave a tight, awkward smile. Rough week, huh? She called out. I just nodded. You could say that. She hesitated like she wanted to say more. Then she just added, Diane said you two were splitting. Sorry to hear. I gave her a polite smile. Thanks. She turned back to her flowers, clearly relieved the conversation was over. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like a ghost. Opening drawers. Checking shelves. Finding little gaps where something used to be. Around 5, I couldn't take the silence anymore. So I got in the car and drove to Vernon's Auto Lounge. It was an old dive shop and hangout rolled into one, a place where you could get your transmission checked and lose 5 hours playing poker in the back. That's where I found Raoul's brother. He was leaning against the vending machine with a soda in hand, still dressed in his shop apron. We made eye contact and his face lit up. "Holy hell," he said. "Look who crawled out of the engineer cave." I smiled faintly. "Been a while?" He nodded, gesturing to the table. "Come sit. You look like someone who just lost a war." Maybe I did. We sat, talked, laughed once or twice. And somewhere between the second drink and the third game of pool, he said something I couldn't stop thinking about. "Have you ever wondered what would have happened if you hadn't deviated from the plan and worked with my brother Raul? You both could have achieved so much together." I didn't answer, but the seed was planted. And it wasn't going away. The next morning, I climbed into the attic like I was looking for something I didn't know I'd lost. The ladder creaked under my weight. The light bulb flickered when I pulled the chain, casting the familiar yellow haze over boxes labeled with faded Sharpie, winter clothes, Zmez stuff, Marcus, college. But I wasn't up there for sweaters or ornaments. Not really. I was looking for ghosts. I found them in a gray plastic tote under a collapsed pile of wrapping paper and broken picture frames. The lid was cracked, one corner bent like it had been shoved aside a dozen times without care. When I pried it open, dust puffed into the air, and right on top were the blueprints, old and frayed, corners curled, my handwriting still visible in the margins. Flightnav Project version 3.2. Raul and Marcus Confidential. I sat down right there on the plywood floor, legs crossed like a kid again. One by one, I pulled out diagrams, schematics, equations scrawled in pen. Some of them had dried coffee stains. Others had blood from paper cuts. All of them were ours. And beneath them, tucked between a binder labeled pitch deck and a folder of outdated invoices, was a USB drive. It was taped to a piece of cardboard that read in black marker, "Keep out, legacy code." I stared at it, heart thumping. That phrase was Raul's idea. It was half joke, half warning back when we used to talk about launching a startup that could revolutionize small aircraft navigation. We were young, stupid, and brilliant in the way only 20-something engineers can be. We had ideas. Big ones. We even built a prototype, a flight NAV module that could adapt midair, correct itself in storms, compensate for signal drop. Raul called it the brain in the sky. We called it ours. Until one day it wasn't. He walked away, got a job offer, took the code, reworked it, and built a company. I didn't blame him. I had just gotten engaged to Diane. Safety over risk. Stability over ambition. But the code in that drive, it was mine too. I grabbed my laptop, plugged it in, and opened the files. The GUI was old, glitchy, but the bones were there. Navigation protocols, correction matrices, terrain prediction logic. Stuff that looked crude by today's standards until I saw the metadata tags. Under the new interface Raul had built into his company's software were fragments of the original codebase. My variables. My architecture. My logic. It wasn't just similar. It was mine. He'd built his empire with my foundation. I sat back, eyes unfocused, mind running in 5 directions at once. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. Raul's headquarters sat on the edge of a converted industrial park, 3 floors of glass and rusting steel that looked more like an aging startup than a powerhouse in aerospace. 5 years ago, it was buzzing. Awards, interns, slick demo videos. Now, the parking lot was half empty and the front desk was manned by a guy in jeans scrolling through his phone. I didn't schedule a meeting. I just walked in. The guy at reception looked up, eyebrows raised. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Raul." He hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, calm. "Tell him Marcus is here." He didn't ask which Marcus. He just stared for a beat, then made the call. Raul met me in the hallway 5 minutes later. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, too. He was wearing the same worn-out vest under the expensive jacket, like he was stuck between tech founder and middle manager. His smile was more for courtesy than from the joy of meeting me. I briefly told him what I wanted to talk about. "Marcus," he said slowly, "didn't expect to hear from you. Let alone this." "Yeah," I said. I figured it was time. He gestured down the hall. "Let's talk in my office." It was quieter in there. He shut the door. "So," he said, folding his arms, "this about the legacy stuff?" I didn't sit. I just looked at him. "You and I both know what's embedded in your core software." Raul nodded slowly, like a man who's already had the argument with himself 100 times. "I reworked it, built on top of it. And anyway, what's the point now? We're barely staying afloat. Because Alec bled you dry," I said, blunt. Raul blinked. "You're his tech pipeline," I continued. "He wins contracts by promising your back end. Logistics, navigation, fleet optimization. All based on your systems. But you don't own anything. You maintain it. He's the one keeping us alive, Raoul muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. No, I said. He's the one using you to prop up his own empire. Raoul's voice cracked, just slightly. I didn't have a choice. I was going under. You still are. You've got 6 months of runway left. 3, if Alec cuts you loose. He rubbed his eyes, shoulders sagging. So what's this, Marcus? You threatening me? I shook my head. No, I'm offering you a deal. He looked up. I'll buy you out, I said. Not just the code. The company. Full acquisition. Raoul laughed, short, bitter. With what money? I have investors. Quiet ones. And I've been sitting on assets you never knew I kept. I paused. You'll get a cut. You'll stay on as CTO. Full creative autonomy. No more Alec. No more contracts you hate. Just rebuild. For real this time. He stared at me, then looked at the floor. Then said, so softly I almost didn't hear. I should have brought you in years ago. You didn't, I said. But now you can. The silence stretched. Then he nodded. All right, Raoul said. Let's do it. 3 weeks later, I owned his company. The papers were signed quietly, the transaction routed through a holding firm with no visible ties to me. Alec didn't notice. Why would he? To him, Raoul was still the same limp executive holding his tech infrastructure together with duct tape and prayer. But he didn't know that the real owner was now sitting in the shadows, watching. And more importantly, tightening the screws. Because Alec depended on this company. And now, he depended on me. Let the siege begin. Alec had no idea that his downfall had already begun. He still walked around like a king. Tailored suits, arrogant smirk, fast cars paid for by billing tricks and shell invoices. He trusted Raoul's systems implicitly, never once considering that someone else might be inside the machine now. Someone quieter, smarter, patient. Me. First thing I did was bring in Julian. Julian used to work military intelligence, a ghost in a digital trench coat. I found him through a contact who owed me a favor. Clean-cut, polite with eyes like razors. We met in a nondescript diner outside Columbus. He stirred his coffee and said, You want surveillance or sabotage? Neither, I replied. I want truth. Quietly. Julian nodded once. Then we start with the audit. 2 weeks later, he had the bones of Alec's operation on my desk. The real ones, buried behind firewalls and dummy records. Fake vendors. Phantom shipments. Double billing on military contracts. Alec's logistics company was a fortress of fraud held together by the arrogance of a man who thought no one would ever check. Everything ran through Raoul's systems. My systems now. Julian mapped the whole thing. Kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. Fuel expenses triple charged under different fleet codes. Even a fake charity Alec funneled money through so he could write off company yachts as donation-related travel. Every shady invoice, every altered line of code. It was all there. And every one of them left a fingerprint. Want to burn him now? Julian asked one night, eyes flicking across his monitor. No, I said. Not yet. Let him keep digging. In parallel, I brought in Valerie Chong. Lawyer. The kind that made opposing counsel cry in depositions. She specialized in forensic acquisitions, buyouts that looked consensual until the moment they weren't. She reviewed the material and gave me a long, impressed look. You've got him by the spine, she said. With enough pressure, this company, his company, and his personal life will collapse like a folding chair. Good, I said. Start drafting the net. From the outside, everything stayed calm. Alec hosted defense dinners, posed for photos with contractors, and kept flashing that confident smile. But behind the scenes, I was rerouting server permissions, flagging vendor accounts, setting up mirror databases that tracked every keystroke his assistants made. Julian installed a shadow dashboard on my laptop, real-time surveillance of Alec's logistics network. See this? He said, tapping a blinking red node. That's an overbilled drone shipment to Fort Bliss. Signed off by one of his ghost execs. Paper trail goes to a mailbox in Delaware. And the funds. Already in a Cayman account. He thinks he's invisible. I nodded. Let's make sure he keeps thinking that. Every week we built the case tighter. 100 data points, each one a nail in Alec's financial coffin. Every purchase, every falsified maintenance log, every email where he approved something he shouldn't have. We weren't exposing him. We were dissecting him. By the end of month 2, Valerie had a file so thick it could crush a desk lamp. She flipped through it casually as if reading a grocery list. He's finished, she said. All we need is the timing. Soon, I told her. Not yet. Because Alec was still standing. Still winning contracts. Still laughing with Diane at company mixers. But he didn't know that every corner of his kingdom was already wired. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I just needed one more quiet move and the whole empire would belong to me. All I had to do now was wait for them to feel the squeeze. And then, I'd pull the trigger. It started slow. One contract fell through. Then another. Diane and Alec both brushed it off at first, claimed it was just delays, budget reshuffling, bureaucratic noise. But I knew better. The clients weren't getting cold feet. They were jumping ship. Valerie had been planting seeds for weeks, quietly reaching out to Alec's biggest accounts through dummy firms and third-party brokers. Offering better service. Better prices. Same tech, better terms. They didn't know it was me. But they knew Raoul's company, the one Alec relied on, was suddenly under new, mysterious ownership. And contracts built on shady spreadsheets and overbilled invoices? Those don't survive scrutiny for long. By the second week of April, Alec was visibly unraveling. He started showing up at work earlier, snapping at interns, scheduling last-minute strategy meetings that everyone dreaded. The usual cocky strut gave way to a stiffer, twitchier energy. His shirts were still pressed, but his face wasn't as smug. Diane noticed it first. I didn't need to be there to know it. People talk. Text. Gossip. The aerospace world isn't big. And Diane was part of it now, attached to Alec by image, by optics, by whatever fragile house of glass they'd built together. She started texting me. Diane, can we talk? Diane, I think you're involved in something. Diane, are you okay? I left them on read. That was what unnerved her most. Not a sharp word. Not a cold reply. Just nothing. She had expected revenge. A tantrum. Maybe even some begging. But I gave her silence. That's when it really started to eat at her. Alec didn't help. He stopped telling her what was going on. Started locking his office. Leaving in the middle of the night to take urgent calls. The paranoia set in fast. He even accused his own assistant of leaking files. By the time the corporate golf event rolled around, Diane looked like a woman carrying a ticking bomb in her handbag. I wasn't invited, obviously. But I was there. In the boardroom. While Alec was teeing off, Valerie and I met with his executive board. Half of them were already on our side, fed up, scared, ready for someone else to take the wheel. The vote was short. Unanimous. Monday morning came sharp and cold. Alec strutted into the office like he always did, late by 15 minutes, coffee in hand, Bluetooth earpiece hanging like a badge of honor. People didn't meet his eyes. The receptionist didn't smile. He stepped into his office, pushed the door open. And there I was. Sitting behind his desk, legs crossed. Good morning, I said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Alec froze, blinking like the lighting had changed. He took a step back, then forward, then squinted. Marcus? I nodded. In the flesh. What the hell are you doing in my office? Alex exclaimed. It's not your office anymore. I replied. He suddenly laughed and called for security. No one's coming, I said calmly. I've already spoken with them. He stepped in fully now, nostrils flaring. You've got 60 seconds to explain what's happening before I call the police. Call them, I said. Might save time. Especially with the fraud investigation about to land on your desk. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I stood slowly, walked to the window, hands behind my back. The city looked different from that height. Smaller. You built this company on contracts you couldn't fulfill. Overcharged vendors. Used Raoul as your personal IT mule and signed off on enough cooked invoices to get a lifetime ban from Federal Logistics. Alec's face twitched. Who fed you that nonsense? I turned to face him. Your server logs. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then laughed again, but it didn't stick this time. You think this little power trip will hold up in court? I don't need court, I said. I have the board. At that moment, the door opened. Valerie stepped in, flanked by 2 men in suits. Behind them, Raoul. This is a private meeting, Alec snapped. Valerie smiled. Not anymore. Raoul nodded toward me, then looked at Alec. We voted. It's done. Alec's voice cracked. Voted? Who the hell are you to it? I own the infrastructure your firm runs on, I said. The code. The logistics engine. The digital signature keys. Everything. You're bluffing, he growled, face red now. You think you can come in here and I already did. Valerie stepped forward, placing a folder on the desk. Included here, she said smoothly, is the acquisition agreement, the fraud documentation, and the termination notice. Effective immediately. Alex snatched the folder, flipped it open, eyes darting across the page. His hands began to shake. You can't do this. You did it to yourself. His voice lowered to a growl. You smug little nothing. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. Just smarter. He lunged forward, but one of the suited men stepped between us. Alec backed off, breathing hard. And then, the final blow. Diane burst into the office. Her eyes flicked from Alec to me to the folder in his hand. Her voice was tight, already unraveling. Marcus, we need to talk. I didn't look at her. Didn't answer. Just walked past them both, out the door, into the hallway. Her voice cracked behind me. Marcus. Still nothing. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to scream. They wanted drama. I gave them silence. And silence was the only answer they'd ever get from me again. Alec's fall wasn't loud. It was slow. Embarrassing. Public in all the worst ways. Within a week, half his contracts were suspended. The other half under review. Vendors backed out. Investors disappeared. His company was gutted from the inside out, with every operational line tied to my tech I now owned, licensed, and restructured under a different name. I didn't have to touch him. I just erased the ground beneath his feet. By the end of the month, Alec was out. Not just of the office, but of the entire industry. His name became shorthand for too slick, too fast, too fraudulent. I heard someone at Vernon's Auto Lounge call it a full Alec job after a guy sold stolen carburetors and tried to play victim. I smiled into my coffee. And Diane? Diane learned quickly what it meant to stand beside a sinking ship. The invitations dried up. Corporate mixers suddenly forgot her name. Her emails got shorter replies. Her coffee dates got canceled or rescheduled indefinitely. No one wanted to be associated with scandal. Especially not someone who'd left a stable, well-liked husband for a man who became an HR cautionary tale. People started whispering. The same people who used to compliment her hair and her handbag now looked through her like she wasn't there. And through all of it, I stayed silent. That's what really got to her, not the business. Not the contracts. Not Alec's spiral. It was my silence. That was the thing Diane never understood. She thought I'd fall apart. She thought I'd beg. Maybe even rage. Instead, I rebuilt. And Diane? She lived in that echo. Every time she walked into a conference room and people paused. Every time a client asked, weren't you with that Alec firm? Every time someone muttered about how Raoul's company had suddenly gotten better overnight. Sunday mornings were always mine. Even when Diane was still here, even before the betrayal, I carved them out like sacred time. No alarms. No TV. Just coffee, silence, and the soft rectangle of sunlight that poured in through the kitchen blinds. This Sunday was no exception. I stood at the counter, mug in hand, steam rising. Outside, the trees were just starting to bloom, that pale green fuzz of spring covering the branches. The world was moving forward, and I was moving with it.